everyone. Thank you for joining. We do appreciate you joining. I know it's early for some of you and at the end of your day for others. So we appreciate everyone who is on the call. Today we are discussing sanctioned party list screening in SAP GTS on HANA. SAP GTS enables SPL screening in a few different ways, and today we'll be focusing on the latest version of GTS 11.0 and the functionalities that HANA enables. Today we have presenters Nilesh Shimpi and Ranjit Nayar, both Krypt consultants, and I won't give too much of an introduction as they'll go ahead and provide some background information on themselves before they present. On the next slide, I'll just go over some quick housekeeping tips. If you do have any questions, please do type them into the questions panel in the GoToWebinar panel screen showed on the screen now. We will try to address all questions at the end of the webinar, but feel free to type them in as we're going through the presentation. Now on the next slide, I'll just quickly introduce Krypt. Krypt is a global SAP partner in the consulting space. We focus on supply chain solutions such as GTS, TM, EWM, GRC, as well as HANA, S/4HANA, Fiori, Ariba, and others. We are a global company. We are headquartered in Santa Clara, California in the United States. We do have offices throughout the European regions. Our European headquarters is in Dublin, Ireland, and we do have an Asia Pacific branch as well. We do projects globally, and we do have our own complementary products in addition to supporting the SAP suite. On the next slide, these are just a few of the books that we've authored. We do strongly believe in thought leadership and supporting the SAP community. We offer white papers and case studies and other resources on our website. The latest book that we authored is a practical guide to SAP GTS 11.0, which we will be focusing on today. So I did want to highlight that we do have a part 1, part 2 book available for those interested. If you are using GTS 11.0, a lot of users find this helpful. We co-authored it with one of our customers as well. So it does have not just a view from the consulting side, but then also from the user side as well. On the next slide, this is just a quick look of some of our products. We do offer complementary products to the SAP suite. Krypt Visibility is our analytics and reporting tool. Krypt Cloud means that you can put your SAP tools on the cloud. Krypt Connect enables you to connect your SAP solution regardless of the ERP that you are using. Krypt UX is our usability and user interface solution, and Krypt Concierge is our support module. Now on the next slide. This is just a glance of some of the customers that we've worked with globally. At this point, I'll go ahead and hand it over to our first presenter, Nilesh. He will walk you through the agenda and then just jump right into the presentation. Nilesh, over to you.
Thank you, Kayleen, and everyone attending this webinar, especially attendees from the Pacific time zone. I know it's too early for you guys. Special thanks for joining. Brief introduction. My name is Nilesh Shimpi, and I'm a senior consultant at Krypt. I have around 11 years of experience, and my primary focus has been in the supply chain area. I'm working on the SAP GTS Global Trade module since 2009 and have implemented projects in various industries like specialty chemicals, petrochemicals, pharmaceuticals, semiconductors, to name a few. Now, last year, we had implemented SPL compliance functionality, which is offered in the latest GTS version 11. for one of our customers in the medical diagnostic sector. So we used the new HANA search procedure, which was rolled up from version 11. So our today's agenda for this webinar is we would like to go over the new SAP HANA search algorithm with you, and then discuss how is it set up. And finally, we will discuss a couple of case studies. So before we start with today's webinar, I would like to discuss what do we actually mean by a sanctioned party. Now, a sanctioned party or an SPL, it's an basically it's an acronym for the sanctioned party list. Now, sanctioned party or a denied party is an individual, or it can be a company entity that has been denied export import privileges. Now, what do we mean is basically trading with such a party is prohibited by law. And if there is any trading or financial dealing with such a party, that would lead to a compliance violation and can result in a civil or criminal prosecution. Now, there are various government agencies and there are international agencies which monitor such party, and then they issue periodic updates. So in the US, to name a few, we have the Department of State, the Department of Commerce, Department of Treasury, and internationally we do have the United Nations or the World Bank. And now each of these organizations, they issue their own denied party or the sanctioned party list. And then there are different data providers available who will compile all such lists from the various government agencies. So they will collate all these lists and they can provide us this list once we procure the subscription. There are different data providers available globally who provide list in a SAP ready format. So they do provide the list in XML format, and then there are standard interfaces in SAP where you can directly upload such list. On the next slide, basically there are various search available algorithms which were available from the initial releases. So from the very first release, we had the classic search algorithm, and it was refined over the time. So in this classic search, basically, you have different parameters that can be optimized to fine-tune the screening results. However, it is still basic and it didn't have the fuzzy or the extended search algorithm logics. So those were missing. And with SAP version 7.2, the T-Rex search was introduced. Now with this T-Rex search, you basically can do the fuzzy or the extended fuzzy search. T-Rex is a free SAP search utility. However, it does require an administration. So there is a separate administration of a T-Rex server required here. And then you assign this T-Rex server in the configuration, and that's how it works. There's a small drawback of this is, let's say if for any reason the T-Rex server is down, then your SAP search is affected. You cannot perform the SPL search during that period. So that was one of the drawback. Now with SAP GTS 11, you can take advantage of the new HANA database, the HANA functionality offered by SAP. So if you use GTS on the HANA database, you can use the SPL search algorithm. The benefits are your search is much faster compared to the classic search. You also have a simpler SPL setup. So in terms of configuration, it is much simpler than the efforts required to configure the classic search. And from the reporting perspective, all your reports, they are run much faster. So these are some of the benefits if you go with SPL HANA search. Of course, it is available from version 10.11, and your GTS must be installed on the HANA database so that you can use this feature. Now let's discuss the different configuration settings which are required for this HANA search. So we do maintain these settings under, there is a special node for this, a defined comparison procedure for HANA search. So here you can maintain all the parameters required for your classic search, T-Rex search, and HANA search. And in this procedure, basically, you mention what kind of search you would be using. So I would talk more on this particular node as it deals with the SAP HANA search. So once you go in that node, you will see these settings. These are the only config settings from the search algorithm perspective you need to maintain. So as you can see, it's a much simplified setup if you compare with the classic GTS, if you have maintained those settings. So the first setting is number of packages. Now, what does number of packages mean? Now, it is here in this field. It is more to do with some technical aspect, and it is here where we select the number of packages that should be executed in parallel in a multi-core processor environment. Now, this is a technical setting, and you should consult your basis team before you choose what particular package is more suitable for your setup, as it depends upon the hardware configuration. The default option is one package. However, you have other options like 5 packages, 10, 20, or 30 packages. If this particular setting doesn't satisfy your need, there is an additional baddie which you can use to add any other screening parameters you want. So there is a special baddie available for this particular field. The next field is the screening pattern. Now basically here we select which name and or address elements should be included in your search procedure. So the standard setting being the name and country. So you use your name, and from the address you only use the country in your comparison procedure. There are 4 other settings available where you can do with the name only or the name, country, straight, and so on. In most cases, the name and country should suffice unless and until you want to have different comparison procedures. You might choose one of the more rigid settings here. Going to the next slide, we have a parameter. The next setting is exactness. Now, what do we mean by exactness? Exactness simply means how 2 words must match so that they can be considered as equal. So for example, here you can see, let's say our business partner name is Jose, and we have an SPL record which we procure from a third-party data provider. So we have an SPL record with the name Jace. Now, if you see, if we maintain the exactness percentage as 80, this setting will not return any results. The reason being, if you see, we have 4 characters in Jose, and out of these 4, only 3 they match in the word J's from SPL entry. So the match percentage is basically 3 by 4 or 75%. And the threshold value which we have maintained, that is 80%. So 75 is less than 80, it doesn't exceed our threshold. And these 2 words will never match if you have an 80% setting. However, if we reduce this exactness parameter to, let's say, 60%, now 60 is less than 75, and then these 2 words will go for a match. So basically, with this exactness setting, what we are doing is we are making our screening more tolerant to the name variations, typos, and so on. So it's not a rigid search where it should be 100% match. If there is a typo or there is some name variation, you can account for that by keeping or by tuning this particular percentage. Now let's move on to the next setting, which is the minimum score. Now this setting defines like how precise 2 names or 2 addresses must match so that they can be considered as a hit. So unlike exactness, which we discussed in our earlier slide, unlike exactness, minimum score affects the name and the addresses as a whole. So it considers the whole string and not just the single word. For example, let's say our business partner name is Thomas Mayer and your SPL entry, the name is Thomas Mayer. Now if we set the exactness parameter, let's say to 90, this setting will not return any hits, as out of the 11 characters or the 11 letters in Thomas Mayer, only 9 letters match in Thomas Mayer. So the match percentage in this case would be 9 by 11 or around 82%, which is again less than the threshold, minimum score threshold we have maintained, which is 90%. So in that case, it won't return any hit. However, if you lower this percentage to, let's say, 80 or 70, then these 2 entries, they would match and we would get 1 hit. Moving on to the next slide, the next setting is the percentage rate of matching words. Now, what do you mean by percentage rate? As the name says, the minimum percentage of words within a full name or a full address that should be matched so that the entry can be considered as an hit. For example, let's say our business partner name is Jose Maria Sisson and our SPL entry, the name is Jose Maria. Now if you take a look, you see that only 2 words out of these 3, okay, so only 2 words from the SPL record matches for the 3 words in the SPL entry. So basically it's a 2 by 3 or a 66% match. Now if I have maintained a threshold of 80%, so 66 is less than 80, and then this particular setting, with this particular setting, you will not get any hit. However, if you reduce this percentage to, let's say, 60 or 65, then these 2 strings or these 2 names, they can match and go for a hit. Now those who are familiar with the configuration settings of classic GTS, you can see that the minimum percentage of matching setting loosely translates to the originating feature setting in the classic GTS. And similarly, the exactness setting that loosely translates to our search term setting in classic GTS. The next setting which I would like to discuss is the symmetric search. So by default, the system uses the number of words in the business partner to calculate the matching percentage rate, which we discussed earlier. But let's consider the same example where the business partner name is Jose Maria Sison and the SPL entry is Jose Maria. Now, if we do not select symmetric search, if we uncheck this box, what would happen? So if we uncheck, the system only uses the number of business partner words. So in this case, it will use Jose Maria Sison. So it will only use these words as the basis for comparison for getting the matching percentage. So a threshold value of 80, like we had set it here, will return will not return a hit if we like we saw if we had a setting of 80. However, let me check this box. So now what happens when I check this? The system will use both the business partner words and the SPL entry when calculating the match percentage. So like we saw with the business partner as a reference, we didn't get a match, but with the SPL entry as a reference, so if you use this as a reference, both these words Jose Maria, they are contained in this business partner. So with SPL as a reference, we have 2 by 2 words, that is 100% match. So with this particular setting, you can change the basis for comparison. Now this completes the whatever settings are required to configure the SPL HANA search. I'll move on to the next slide. Now from SPL reporting perspective, we have to activate certain reports and their respective accelerators. Now what does this do is this activation permits the accelerators to access the relevant data in the HANA database as quickly as possible. So you have these 3 options available. So GTS accelerator can be activated for your audit trail or your block business partner report or your block document reports. Moving on to the next slide, there are few SPL HANA specific master data settings. Now in the classic search, we did have delimiters, excluded words, aliases. We do have a different set of master data settings for HANA search. So one word being the stop word and the other is the term mapping. Now what is a stop word? Stop words are basically words or phrases that are of less importance or less significant for the search. Now this setting is similar to the excluded term setting which we have in the classic GTS. For example, we used to add words like limited or AG, LLP, LLC. So all these excluded words you can add in this stop word table. Term mappings are additional terms used to extend the search, and they are similar to the alias setting which we had in our classic GTS search. So typically you can add synonyms, but other semantics like hyponyms, hypernyms, they can also be added to the term mapping table. Now, if you observe here, both these stop words and term mapping, they are basically language dependent, which was not the case in the classic algorithm. So here you can have the settings as a language dependent, and that is an advantage over the classic search. Now, both stop words and term mappings are maintained, then the term mappings are applied first. So to that text, first the term mappings would be applied, and then the stop words would be applied to all the different variations. So once the term mappings are applied, you will get set of various search terms, and then on those search terms, the stop words would be applied. As we discussed earlier, the implementation effort for the HANA search algorithm is low, and it has a simplified setup and execution. So as you can see, steps which were required in the classic GTS search, like resetting the application buffer or generating the comparison terms or aggregating the comparison terms, so these steps will not be required when you execute the SAP HANA search. What you need is you only need to upload the content, the delta files from your data provider, and then run the respective screening scenario, either C1, C2, or whichever you usually run. So you can run those scenarios, that's it, and you don't need to set up any batch jobs for these intermediate steps. Now, let me go over a case study. So a little bit customer background. Now, customer is one of a top 10 medical diagnostics company manufacturer in the world. The company operates as an independent company, and it was a spin-off of a major pharma company's diagnostics division. Worldwide operations in more than 120 plus countries. And when they were working on the shared service model with the parent company, they had around 10 different ERP instances worldwide, and around 490 small or big applications. Now, when setting up the IT applications or infrastructure as an independent company, they basically decided to go with a simplified setup and simplify their processes. So towards that goal, the customer chose SAP S/4HANA and Simple Finance and other products in Ariba Cloud, and we have the SCM suite of products here. So that was their applications in their new landscape. And post divestiture, SAP GTS was decided as their system for trade and compliance checks. Below are some of the customer goals. So the primary goal was moving towards a single global instance of ERP. There was a huge volume of business partners across the globe, which would be screened for a sanctioned party list screening. We did have certain acceptable hit rates for the false positives, and the business did provide us with a template file, and all the partners which were on that file, they should be blocked by the current SPL or the new SPL HANA search settings. So these were some of the customer goals. Coming to the roadmap implementation, so we were trying to leverage both the greenfield and the lift and shift approach. So as you can see, they chose the SAP HANA search um, to go and do their SPL screening, compliance screening. We had 4 region-specific go-live dates, so spread out over 20 months, covering the 4 different regions. So in our initial phases, GTS will primarily interface with the SAP ERP and few web services. Okay, some of the challenges we faced now after the completion of SPL HANA configuration, when we initially ran SPL, we did get some runtime errors, above dumps. Now, when we analyzed those errors, the reason we found was certain HANA views were missing. Now, the basis team, they need to run few reports. Now, you can see these reports. They need to run these reports. These have to be executed on a one-time basis, and they are also mentioned in the master guide. The second challenge we faced was the optimally using the stop words. Now, if you have maintained many stop words in your table, you might miss certain true hits, whereas fewer or no stop words would increase your false positives. So fine-tuning the HANA parameters takes some time, and we had to run through a number of different iterations to achieve the desired hit rates. Achievements we had is we had overall the block partners reports and the block document reports. So when the users they executed these reports, they found a marked improvement in the runtime compared to the classic search which they were using earlier. So these reports, the runtime is improved a lot, and the SPL HANA settings were optimized for the desired hit rates, and the customer was happy with the hit rate. So that's it from my end that I had to discuss on SPL HANA search. I would like to pass on to my fellow colleague Ranjit Nair, who would walk through another case study and share his experience. Thank you. Over to you, Ranjit.
Hey, hi Nilesh. Thank you so much. Thank you, Nilesh, for sharing your experience with SPL HANA implementation and also walking all of us through the HANA configuration. Hi everyone, I'm Ranjit. I'm working as a senior SAP GTS SP and TM consultant with Krypt Inc. I have close to 12 years of consulting experience in SAP, and have been extensively working in full lifecycle implementations, multi-country rollouts, upgrades and support projects in SAP, and for clients from across industries like electronics, high-tech, automobile, pharmaceutical and medical devices. And today I would like to actually walk you through one of the customer POCs, proof of concept, which we did for SPL HANA. And let me first start with giving you a brief background of the customer and how their landscape looks like. So customer is one of the leading manufacturing companies, and they are a SAP shop who are already using SAP ECC, SAP GTS, APO, and a host of other SAP applications. And they also have multiple non-SAP systems in their landscape. So this SAP GTS system is widely used for their compliance and custom solution. And the SAP GTS instance is integrated with multiple instance of SAP ECC system, screening millions of business partners. And also the non-SAP ECC, the non-SAP ERP system is feeding several millions of business partners to GTS, and those business partners are screened using a web service call, which is we call as the ad hoc SPL screening. So that's about the background. So they were actually using the classic SPL settings, and using those settings, they were actually having some issues. Like one of the key issue was the false positive rate which they were getting using the classic settings were very high, considering that they have a huge or a very large volume of business partners. And secondly, internally as an organization, they used to have a lot of audits, internally and externally, a lot of audit which happens in the compliance space. And over a period of time, they have consolidated these test names from these various audits into a template. And they want to make sure that the system should actually hit 100% with that particular audit test names. So these were a couple of the key issues. And with the classic settings, they were always facing a struggle, or they were finding it difficult to strike a balance between getting a 100% hit with the audit test names and also getting a less false positive rate. And last but not least, with this huge volume of business partners, the other issue was the accuracy and the efficiency of the screening. So with all these three issues, they want to go with SPL HANA, which actually promises a robust and more efficient screening at a much faster rate. So what we did is, from a methodology perspective, since they were having multiple instances of ECC system, we took a sample size of data from their SAP ECC system, which ran into several 100,000 records, and also took an extract of business partner master data from the non-SAP EC system, non-SAP ERP system. And this was screened or tested against the various SPL HANA settings. So multiple iterations had to be performed with these various settings to ultimately get a much better false positive rate and match rate. And while performing this proof of concept, we faced a couple of challenges. To start with, the first one was more of a technical in nature. So Nilesh has already briefed on that particular thing. That so in our case, it was, so they were already having SAP GTS and were already running on classic SPL setting. So once we make the switch from the classic SPL to the HANA, so and then we start running this SPL screening, then you actually get an ABAP runtime error. Okay, and that was a time when we checked, and then we found we had to implement those two specific SAP reports from a basic standpoint to create the SPL HANA search. So once we overcome that challenge, then the other unique thing we found was the GTS system was actually fed with two different set of data. One data from the SAP ERP system or SAP ECC instances, and the other data was fed from a non-ERP instances. So these two data were quite different. The SAP ECC business partner master data was mostly entities and organizational data, so the names were different, while the non-SAP systems were primarily having individuals and persons. So the business partners were mostly master data having names with 4 to 5 words. So with these two totally different master data, we found a bit of a challenge to fine-tune the system. Multiple iterations had to be performed and even the stop words, which are in an old or classic SPL terminology, it is the exclude text. They were using a very large number of stop terms. So we also had to fine tune that stop terms so that we get an optimal false positive rate and also a good match rate with the audit test name. So once we overcome these challenges, we were actually able to achieve a much better false positive rate and also almost close to 100% match rate with the audit test names. So that was one of the key achievements. Then the other best thing about HANA is with the switching from the conventional or the classic SPL to HANA, all of the jobs and the transactions ran at a much faster rate, giving you the result. Even with a larger volume, it ran at a much faster rate. So these were one of the key achievements from that for that specific POC. And we were also able to streamline their stop terms with the industry best practice. So because stop terms actually plays a key role in the false positive rate. And now I would like to move on to another thing, which basically some of the tips I will want to share with the community is in the HANA is, as Nilesh has walked you through the configuration settings. So the SPL HANA basically works with three key configuration settings, or it's a much simplified setup compared to your classic setting. So one is the exactness, second is the percentage of matching words, and third is the minimum score. So from a HANA, SPL HANA perspective, for a name or an address attribute to be considered a hit, all the three parameters need to pass the threshold. So if one of them fails, then the system will not return that name or address attribute as a hit. So that is how the SPL HANA works. And the other thing is, we discussed that already, that the stop terms is something, or in known terminology, it is the exclude text. You need to actually work or use that stop term with caution. So if you overdo stop terms, then it negatively impacts your false positive rate. And if you use very less stop terms, that also impacts you in a negative fashion. So it's basically it's more of a consulting thing. Like you need to actually understand the business partner master data, which is fed to GTS, how the quality of the data, and based on that, you have to use and optimize the stop terms, and that will help you to get the a better false positive rate. And the other thing is, moving on, is in HANA, the system uses something called an HANA score. So in the screenshot, you can see on the right hand bottom side, the last column is called score. So if you expand that, it is called the HANA score. So basically what the system, what system does is, system uses a specific algorithm behind the scenes to calculate a score, and this score is more or less equal to the minimum score what you maintained in your configuration. So it is more, so it's more of a thumb rule. So it's not exact, but that will give you an understanding how the system creates the HANA score. Okay, and the other important aspect is in the same SPL screening, system shows a column called matched original SPL terms. So this would be on the same screenshot, the bottom right hand side, the fourth column called SPL terms. So in that, under that particular column, the system actually lists down all of the match terms in SPL which has passed the exactness test. So exactness, if you remember, is one of the configuration settings which we maintained for HANA. So So under this particular column, the system lists all of the terms which has passed that exactness test. Okay, so with this, I would like to conclude on the technical aspect of this webinar for SPL HANA. And I hope all of the information what we as a team has shared, as you found it very useful, and probably you can use that for your implementations or in your client projects. Thank you. And I would like to pass it on to Kelly.
Thanks, Ranjit, and thank you, Nilesh, for your presentation. Just to conclude this, some final thoughts that we had. The reason we showed two different customer examples is to show that every customer has unique landscapes and every customer can come across different hurdles. One of the things that we think is really important is to partner with someone who has the experience in different industries and coming across different problems so that you can mitigate and streamline those issues. Again, these two customer examples don't address all potential roadblocks that you could come across, but it does give a good example of some common problems that we've seen various customers have, and then also, as well as problems, the benefits that many customers see through SPL on HANA. At this point, we do want to open it up to questions. As I mentioned before, if you do have any questions, type them into the questions and answer, the questions panel and go to webinar. Our contact information is listed here on the screen. So if you do have questions outside of this webinar, feel free to reach out to us and we'd be happy to either get on a call or just exchange emails.